Olivia's boots touched the Colorado ground, and she looked around the mining town with eyes that had seen too many miles in too few days. The September sun beat down on Victor with an intensity that made the mountains shimmer in the distance, and she could see the skeletal frame of buildings rising from the earth, the bustle of miners and merchants, and somewhere in this chaos was supposed to be a man named Colton Murphy, who had written her 3 letters filled with careful penmanship and cautious hope. She had responded to his advertisement because Boston had become a cage after her father died and left her with nothing but debts, and the unwanted attention of men who saw a woman alone as an opportunity. Colton's letters had promised respect, a home, and the chance to build something new in the Western Territories. She had not expected to arrive early. The train connections had been better than anticipated, and she had taken the risk of pushing forward rather than waiting in Denver for 3 weeks, spending money she did not have on lodging. The stagecoach driver hauled her trunks down, and Olivia paid him from her dwindling funds. "Excuse me," she said to a passing woman carrying a basket of laundry. "Could you direct me to the Murphy Ranch?" The woman stopped, eyeing Olivia's fine traveling dress with curiosity. "Murphy, Colton Murphy. He's got a place about 2 miles north of town. You can't miss it. There is a half-built barn and a cabin that looks like it is still deciding whether to stand or fall." Olivia's stomach tightened. Half-built. The letters had made everything sound established, ready. "Thank you," she managed, and the woman nodded before continuing on her way. She stood there in the dust with her trunks, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. But Boston was behind her, and she had spent every cent getting here. Forward was the only direction left. "You need help, miss." A young boy, perhaps 12, approached with a wagon. "I need to get to the Murphy Ranch," Olivia said. "I can pay you 50 cents if you will take me and my things." The boy's eyes lit up. "Yes, madam, load up." Colton stood in front of his barn, paintbrush dripping white onto the ground, and watched the wagon approach with a sense of impending doom. He recognized the trunks first, expensive leather that stood out against the rough wood of the wagon bed, and then he saw her, sitting straight-backed beside young Timothy Walsh, and his mind went completely blank. She was not supposed to be here yet. He had 3 more weeks. 3 weeks to finish the barn, to repair the porch steps, to figure out how to be the kind of man who could have a wife. The cabin behind him was clean but sparse. The pantry held mostly beans and coffee, and he had been sleeping on a bedroll because the actual bed frame was still in pieces in the corner, waiting for him to find time to assemble it. The wagon stopped in front of him, and Olivia looked down at the man who was supposed to be her husband. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of the sky before a storm. His shirt was spattered with paint, his hands were rough, and he looked absolutely horrified to see her. "Mr. Murphy," she asked, keeping her voice steady despite the sinking feeling in her chest. Colton swallowed hard. "Yes, you must be Miss Porter." "I am." She accepted Timothy's hand and climbed down from the wagon, her legs shaky from days of travel. "I apologize for arriving early. The connections were better than expected, and I thought it better to come ahead than to wait in Denver." He stood there like a fool, still holding the paintbrush, and then seemed to realize it. He set it down on the ground with exaggerated care, wiping his hands on his pants. "No, that is, of course, I was not expecting you until October." The silence stretched between them, awkward and heavy. Timothy unloaded the trunks, and Colton paid him $1, which made the boy's face split into a grin before he drove off, leaving them alone. Olivia looked at the cabin, the half-painted barn, the yard that was more dust than grass. Her heart sank further, but she had learned long ago not to let disappointment show on her face. Should I go inside? Yes. Yes, of course. Colton grabbed her trunks, one in each hand, and carried them toward the cabin. She followed, noting the porch steps that creaked ominously under their weight, the door that hung slightly crooked on its hinges. Inside was better than outside, at least in terms of cleanliness. The cabin was small, just one main room with a fireplace, a table with 2 chairs, a stove, and a corner that held the disassembled bed frame. There was a curtain that presumably hid a sleeping area, though from the bedroll on the floor, it was clear that was where Colton had been staying. He set her trunks down and turned to face her, his expression a mixture of embarrassment and something that might have been panic. "I know this is not what you expected." Olivia removed her gloves carefully, buying time to collect her thoughts. "Your letters mentioned a ranch." "It will be a ranch," he said quickly. "I have 40 acres, good grazing land, water rights. I have been building it up over the past 2 years. I have 6 head of cattle right now, and I am working on the barn to house more. By next spring, I will have doubled the herd. I needed more time." She heard the truth in his words, saw it in the way he stood there, looking at her like she was a judge about to deliver a verdict. And perhaps she was. She could get back on a stagecoach, return to Denver, find work somehow. Or she could stay and make something of this half-built dream. "Do you have coffee?" she asked finally. He blinked. "What? Coffee? I have been traveling for 5 days, and I would very much like a cup of coffee." Relief washed over his face so clearly that she almost smiled. "Yes, I have coffee. Let me make some." While he worked at the stove, Olivia sat at the table and looked around the cabin with fresh eyes. It was not ready for a wife, that much was clear. But it was clean, solidly built, and the man fumbling with the coffee pot was trying. She could see it in every unfinished project, every careful repair. He had been building something, and she had arrived before he thought he was ready to share it. "How old are you, Mr. Murphy?" she asked. 26, he said, measuring out coffee grounds. "You are 23, according to your letters." "I am." She watched his hands, noting the calluses, the scars, hands that worked hard. "Have you been alone here the whole time?" "Mostly. I came out from Missouri 2 years ago after my parents died. Sold the family farm, split the money with my sister, and came west to start over." He poured water into the pot. "I spent the first year working in the mines to save up money, then bought this land. I have been building it up piece by piece." "Why did you want a wife?" The question was blunt, but Olivia had learned that directness saved time and heartache. Colton turned to face her, leaning against the counter while the coffee heated. "Because a ranch needs a family. Because I am tired of being alone. Because I want to build something that matters, and that takes more than one person." He met her eyes. "I was honest in my letters, Miss Porter. I do not have much yet, but I am working toward something real. I wanted a partner in that, not just a housekeeper." It was the right answer, or at least an honest one. Olivia felt some of the tension in her shoulders ease. "Then I suppose we should figure out how to be partners." The coffee boiled, and Colton poured 2 cups, bringing them to the table. He sat across from her, and they drank in silence for a moment, both taking the measure of the other. "I need to finish the barn," Colton said finally. "Winter comes early this high up, and the cattle need shelter. After that, I can work on the house, make it more comfortable." "What about the bed?" Olivia asked, nodding toward the pile of wood in the corner. He flushed. "I will put it together tonight. You can sleep in the bed, and I will take the bedroll outside." "We are supposed to be married," Olivia pointed out. "Not yet, not properly." He turned the cup in his hands. "I figured we would go to the preacher once you arrived, make it official. But if you want time to decide, to see if this will work, I understand." Olivia considered this. She had come here expecting to marry immediately, to begin a new life without delay. but the man across from her was offering her something unexpected: choice. What if I say no? What if I decide this is not what I want? Then I will give you money for the stage coach back to Denver and enough to keep you until you find something else. His voice was quiet but firm. I will not trap you here, Miss Porter. It was the right answer again, and Olivia found herself relaxing further. Call me Olivia. If we are going to be partners, you should use my name. Colton, he replied, and smiled for the first time since she had arrived. It changed his face entirely, softening the hard lines and making him look younger, less burdened. All right, Colton, Olivia said, setting down her cup. I will stay, at least for now. But I want to be useful, not just sit around while you work. What needs doing? He looked at her, really looked at her, taking in the traveling dress and the careful posture and the determination in her eyes. Can you cook? Yes. Then cooking would help. I have been living on beans and bacon for longer than I care to admit. He paused. Can you sew? I can. The curtains need mending, and I could use some new shirts. He seemed to be warming to the idea of her presence. Do you know anything about livestock? No, but I can learn. Colton nodded slowly. Then we will figure it out together. The first week was an awkward dance of two strangers learning to occupy the same space. Colton woke before dawn and worked until dark, finishing the barn painting and then moving on to repairing fence posts. Olivia established herself in the cabin, taking stock of the pantry and finding it even more dismal than she had feared. She made a list of supplies they needed and presented it to Colton over dinner on the third night. He looked at the list, his face falling. This is a lot, I know. But if you want proper meals instead of beans, we need flour, sugar, salt, lard, and vegetables. And if winter is coming, we should stock up on preserved goods. Colton rubbed his face tiredly. I have money set aside for supplies, but I was planning to buy more cattle next month. Olivia felt a pang of guilt. Her early arrival had disrupted his plans more than she had realized. What if I earned some money? I could take in sewing or laundry. The town is full of miners who need their clothes mended. He looked up sharply. You do not need to do that. I want to help, she insisted. You are building this ranch for both of us, are you not? Then let me contribute. Something shifted in his expression, a kind of respect mixing with the exhaustion. All right, but we split what you earn between supplies and savings. I do not want you working yourself to death for flour. They went to town together that Saturday, taking the wagon. Victor was bustling with activity, miners coming and going from the various claims, merchants hawking their wares, and the sound of hammers ringing out as new buildings went up. Olivia attracted attention immediately, being a new face and a woman besides, and she felt Colton move closer to her, protective without being possessive. They bought basic supplies first, flour and sugar and coffee, stretching Colton's dollars as far as they would go. Then Olivia asked around about sewing work and found immediate interest. She took 3 orders that day, promising to have them done within the week. On the way back to the ranch, sitting beside Colton on the wagon seat, Olivia felt something unexpected: hope. The work would be hard and there were no guarantees, but there was something solid about the man beside her, something real about the life they were starting to build. Thank you, Colton said suddenly. For what? For staying. For helping. For not running away screaming when you saw what a mess I had made. Olivia laughed, surprising herself. The week is not over yet. I might still run away screaming. He smiled, and she realized she was starting to like that smile, the way it softened his whole face. Fair enough. The second week brought the first real test. An early autumn storm rolled down from the mountains, bringing cold rain and wind that rattled the cabin walls. Colton spent the day securing the animals and reinforcing the barn, coming back soaked and chilled to the bone. Olivia had hot coffee waiting, and a stew that actually tasted like something other than salt and desperation. That night, as the storm raged outside, they sat by the fire and talked in a way they had not before. Colton told her about growing up on a farm in Missouri, about his parents who had worked themselves to exhaustion and died within months of each other, leaving him and his sister to pick up the pieces. Olivia told him about Boston, about her father who had been a clerk until drink took him, about the men who had circled after his death, offering marriage that was really just acquisition. "I was afraid," she admitted, staring into the flames. "When I got on the train, I did not know if I was being brave or stupid." "Both, probably," Colton said, and when she looked at him in surprise, he shrugged. "Most brave things are a little bit stupid. Coming out here, buying this land, thinking I could build a ranch by myself, that was stupid too. But maybe stupid is what it takes to build something new." The storm lasted 2 days, trapping them inside together, and somewhere in those 2 days, the awkwardness began to fade. They learned each other's rhythms, the comfortable silences and easy conversations. Colton assembled the bed frame properly, insisting Olivia take it while he kept to his bedroll near the fire. She did not argue, but she felt guilty every night, hearing him shift on the hard floor. On the 3rd week, Olivia delivered the mending she had taken in and collected her payment. With that money, she bought seeds for a winter garden and a laying hen from a woman on the edge of town. Colton came home to find the hen installed in a hastily built coop and Olivia covered in dirt from planting. "You built a chicken coop?" he asked, staring. "It is not pretty, but it works," she said defensively. He walked around it, examining her work, and then laughed. Actually laughed, loud and genuine. "It is terrible. The door does not fit right and the whole thing is crooked." Olivia felt her face heat with embarrassment and anger. "I did my best." "I know," he said, still grinning. "That is what makes it perfect. Come here, let me show you how to measure properly and we will fix it together." They spent the afternoon rebuilding the coop, Colton teaching her how to use the tools, how to measure twice and cut once. His hands guided hers and she became aware of his closeness, the warmth of him behind her, the patient tone of his voice. When they finished, the coop was sturdy and square, and Olivia felt absurdly proud of it. "We make a good team," Colton said, standing back to admire their work. "We do," Olivia agreed and meant it. That night, Colton brought up the subject they had been dancing around for 3 weeks. "We should get married," he said over dinner. "Properly, I mean. People in town are talking, and I do not want your reputation damaged." Olivia set down her fork carefully. "Is that the only reason?" He met her eyes, and she saw something there that made her breath catch. "No, I want to marry you because I like having you here. Because you make me laugh and you work hard and you did not run away when you saw what a disaster I had made of things. Because I think we could build something good together if you are willing." It was not a declaration of love, but it was honest, and Olivia had learned to value honesty above pretty words. "I am willing," she said quietly, "but I need to know something first." "What?" "Do you think you could love me? Eventually." Colton was quiet for a long moment, and Olivia's heart hammered in her chest. Then he said, "I think I already am starting to." They were married the following Sunday in Victor's small church, with the preacher's wife and the general store owner standing as witnesses. Olivia wore her best dress, dark blue with white trim, and Colton wore a new shirt that she had made for him. He had gotten a haircut, and she had put her hair up with pins that had been her mother's. The ceremony was simple, the words old and familiar. When the preacher said, "You may kiss your bride," Colton leaned down and kissed her softly, carefully, like she was something precious. It was their first real kiss, and Olivia felt it all the way to her toes. They went back to the ranch as husband and wife, and that night, The bedroll by the fire stayed empty. Colton was gentle, patient, leading her through the awkwardness of first intimacy with a consideration that made her want to cry. Afterwards, lying in the dark with his arm around her, Olivia felt something settle in her chest, a sense of rightness that she had not expected to find. "I am glad you came early," Colton murmured against her hair. "So am I," Olivia whispered back. October brought colder weather and harder work. The cattle needed to be moved to the winter pasture, and Colton taught Olivia how to ride properly, not side saddle like a lady but astride like a ranch hand. She fell off twice before she got the hang of it, and both times Colton helped her up with a mixture of concern and poorly hidden amusement. They worked dawn to dusk, preparing for winter. Olivia's garden produced late vegetables that she preserved in jars, lining the cabin shelves with proof of her labor. The chicken, which she had named Henrietta out of sheer perversity, laid eggs every other day, providing a welcome addition to their diet. Money was tight, tighter than Colton had admitted at first. He had sunk everything into the land and the cattle, gambling on a future that was still uncertain. But they made it work, stretching every dollar, bartering where they could. Olivia traded her sewing for meat from the butcher, for milk from a neighboring homestead 3 miles south. In November, the first real snow fell, blanketing the ranch in white. Colton came in from checking the cattle with news. "Johnson down the valley is selling out, going back east. He has 12 head of cattle he wants to move quickly." Olivia looked up from the bread she was kneading. "Can we afford them?" "Not outright. But he will take payment in installments if I give him half up front." Colton ran his hand through his hair. A gesture she had learned meant he was worried. "It would put us in debt, but it would also nearly triple our herd. Come spring, we could sell half and make back the money with profit. Or we could have a bad winter and lose everything," Olivia said slowly, thinking it through. "Yes." She looked at her husband, saw the hope and fear warring in his face. This was what he had been working toward, the chance to make the ranch more than a dream. "What do you think we should do?" "I think we should take the risk," Colton said. "But it affects both of us, so you get a say." Olivia thought about Boston, about playing it safe and losing everything anyway. She thought about the coop they had built together, crooked at first but solid in the end. "Let's do it," she said. They bought Johnson's cattle, and suddenly the ranch felt real. 18 head was not a large herd by any means, but it was substantial, enough to be a proper operation. Colton worked even harder, making sure the animals were fed and sheltered, checking them twice daily for signs of illness. Olivia worked beside him when she could, learning to recognize the different animals to spot trouble before it became critical. Her hands, once soft and useless, became rough and capable. She learned to mend fences, to break ice on water troughs, to haul hay in quantities that would have seemed impossible months ago. The debt hung over them, a constant worry, but it also gave them purpose. They were not just surviving anymore. They were building toward something specific, something measurable. December arrived with bitter cold and shorter days. The cabin, which had seemed sparse and rough when Olivia first arrived, now felt like home. She had made curtains from fabric bought with her sewing money, had sewn quilts to layer on the bed, had arranged their few possessions into something that felt personal, lived in. Christmas approached, and Olivia wanted to do something special. She had no money for gifts, but she spent 3 nights staying up after Colton fell asleep, working by firelight to make him a new winter coat from fabric she had bartered for. On Christmas morning, she presented it to him nervously, worried that her stitching was not good enough, that it would not fit properly. Colton put it on and stood there looking at her with an expression she could not quite read. Then he pulled her into his arms and held her tight, his face buried in her hair. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough. "I love it. I love you." It was the first time he had said it plainly, without qualification, and Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. "I love you too," she whispered back, and meant it with every fiber of her being. He had a gift for her too, produced with shy pride. A rocking chair he had built in the barn during stolen hours, carved with a simple pattern along the back. She sat in it and rocked, feeling the smooth wood and the steady motion, and thought about futures, about children who might someday sit on her lap in this chair. They spent Christmas Day together, just the two of them, cooking a modest feast and talking about the year ahead. It was simple, quiet, and perfect in a way that Olivia would remember for the rest of her life. January tested them in ways they had not anticipated. A blizzard swept down from the mountains, lasting 4 days and burying the ranch under snow that reached halfway up the cabin walls. Colton fought his way to the barn twice daily to care for the cattle, coming back frost-bitten and exhausted. On the 3rd day, he found 2 head dead, suffocated when part of the barn roof collapsed under the weight of snow. He came inside looking defeated, and Olivia did not offer empty platitudes. Instead, she made him hot coffee laced with the last of their whiskey, helped him out of his frozen clothes, and held him while he processed the loss. "We still have 16 head," she said when he was ready to hear it. "We will make it work." "I should have reinforced that roof," he said bitterly. "You did not know," Olivia replied firmly. "You cannot predict everything, Colton. We learn and we do better next time." He looked at her, this woman who had arrived unprepared and unannounced, who had faced every challenge without complaint, who had become his true partner in every sense. "How did you get so strong?" "I had a good teacher," she said, kissing him softly. The blizzard finally broke and they dug out slowly, assessing the damage. The barn needed repairs, but it was fixable. The cattle that remained were healthy. They had lost ground, but they had not lost everything. February brought slightly warmer weather and the first signs of spring. Colton took 3 steers to market, getting a good price that allowed them to pay down part of the debt and buy seed for spring planting. Olivia was feeling sick in the mornings, and when the pattern continued for 2 weeks, she allowed herself to hope. The doctor in Victor confirmed what she already suspected. She was expecting a child due in late summer. She told Colton that evening over dinner, watching his face carefully. He went very still, his fork halfway to his mouth. "A baby." "Yes. Around August, the doctor thinks." Colton set down his fork and came around the table, kneeling beside her chair. He put his hand on her belly, flat still but holding their future. "Are you all right? Is everything all right?" "I am fine. We are fine." She covered his hand with hers. "Are you happy?" "Happy." He laughed, slightly wild. "Olivia, I am terrified. I am ecstatic. I do not know the first thing about being a father." "And I do not know the first thing about being a mother," she replied. "We will learn together just like everything else." Spring transformed the ranch from a place of survival to a place of possibility. Colton plowed a larger garden plot, and Olivia planted vegetables in neat rows, thinking about feeding a family. They hired a drifter named Tom for a few weeks to help with the heavy work, paying him in meals and a place to sleep in the barn. Olivia's belly grew, and with it, their plans for the future. They talked about additions to the cabin, about expanding the herd further, about schools and churches and all the things that seemed important when you were bringing a new life into the world. The other ranchers' wives started visiting, bringing advice and hand-me-down baby clothes. Olivia had been so focused on work that she had not realized how isolated she had been. These women, weathered and strong, welcomed her into their circle with a matter-of-factness that touched her deeply. May brought the first real crisis since the blizzard. A band of cattle rustlers had been working the area, and one night they hit the Murphy ranch, making off with 5 head before Colton could stop them. He rode after them with 3 other ranchers, and Olivia spent 2 days alone, pregnant and frightened, checking the horizon constantly for his return. When he came back, he was bruised and exhausted but alive. They had recovered 4 of the 5 head, and the rustlers had been turned over to the marshal in the next county. Colton held Olivia tight, feeling the swell of her belly between them, and swore he would never leave her alone like that again. "We need help," he said finally. "I cannot run this place by myself anymore, not with a baby coming." They hired a young man named David, fresh from Ireland and looking for work. He was 18, earnest and willing to learn. He bunked in the barn and took his meals with them, becoming part of their small family. June was beautiful, the mountains green and the sky impossibly blue. Olivia moved more slowly now, her belly prominent, but she still insisted on helping where she could. Colton worried constantly, hovering until she finally snapped at him to stop treating her like she was made of glass. "Women have been having babies for thousands of years," she said, exasperated. "I am pregnant, not dying." "I know," he said, "but you are my wife and I am allowed to worry." She softened at that, taking his hand and placing it on her belly where the baby was kicking. "Feel that? That is your son or daughter saying hello." Colton felt the movement under his palm and his eyes filled with tears. "That is incredible. That is life," Olivia said gently. "Our life." July brought heat and the final preparations. The cabin had been cleaned until it shone, baby clothes washed and folded, a cradle built and placed beside their bed. The doctor and Victor had agreed to come when Olivia's time arrived, and Mrs. Henderson from the neighboring ranch would assist. Olivia felt huge and uncomfortable, her back aching constantly, her sleep disrupted by the baby's movements. But she also felt powerful, aware of her body's capability in a way she never had been before. On a hot August afternoon, the pain started. Colton sent David riding for the doctor and Mrs. Henderson while he helped Olivia into the cabin, his face pale with fear. "It is all right," Olivia said, gripping his hand during a contraction. "This is normal. This is how it works." "You are far too calm about this," Colton said, his voice shaking. "One of us has to be." She managed a smile between pains. The labor lasted through the night and into the next morning. Colton stayed with her despite Mrs. Henderson's suggestion that he wait outside, holding her hand, wiping her face, murmuring encouragement. When their son finally arrived with the sunrise, squalling and red-faced and perfect, Colton wept openly. "A boy," the doctor said, placing the baby in Olivia's arms. "A healthy boy." Olivia looked down at her son, at this small person she and Colton had created, and felt love so fierce it took her breath away. "Hello, little one," she whispered. Colton touched the baby's tiny hand, watching in awe as small fingers wrapped around his. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names but never settled on one. Now, looking at her son's face, Olivia said, Christopher Murphy." "Christopher," Colton repeated, testing it out. "I like it. Christopher James, after your father." Olivia's father had been a complicated man, but he had loved her in his way. "Yes, Christopher James Murphy." The weeks after Christopher's birth were a blur of sleepless nights and constant feedings. Olivia was exhausted in a way she had never experienced, but also happy in a way she had never imagined. Colton helped however he could, changing diapers, walking the floor with a crying baby at 3 in the morning, taking over the cooking when Olivia was too tired to stand. David proved invaluable, handling the ranch work so Colton could focus on his family. The young man was saving his pay, planning to buy his own land someday, and Colton taught him everything he knew about ranching, about cattle and land management, and the thousand small skills that made the difference between success and failure. September arrived, and with it, a letter from Colton's sister in Missouri. She was married now, expecting her own first child, and she wanted to meet her nephew and sister-in-law. The letter was warm, full of joy, and Colton read it aloud to Olivia with a smile. "Maybe we could visit next year," he suggested, "when Christopher is older and the travel would be easier." "I would like that," Olivia said, watching her son sleep in his cradle. "I would like for him to know his family." The ranch was thriving now, the herd growing, the land productive. They had paid off half their debt and had money in the bank for the first time since Olivia had arrived. It was not wealth, not by any measure, but it was security, stability, the foundation of something lasting. October marked a year since they should have met, 2 months since Christopher's birth, and 14 months since Olivia had stepped off that stagecoach. Colton suggested they celebrate their anniversary properly, with a trip into town for dinner at the hotel restaurant. Olivia dressed carefully in a new dress she had made, one that fit her post-baby body, and Colton wore his good suit. They left Christopher with Mrs. Henderson, both of them anxious and missing him before they even reached town. The restaurant was crowded, full of miners and merchants and families. Colton and Olivia sat at a corner table, and he ordered steak for both of them, an extravagance they never allowed themselves at home. "To us," Colton said, raising his glass of cider. "To a year of marriage, to Christopher, to everything we have built." "To everything we will build," Olivia added, clinking her glass against his. They ate slowly, savoring the food and the rare moment of being alone together as adults, not just as parents. Colton reached across the table and took her hand. "I need to tell you something," he said seriously. Olivia's heart skipped. "What?" "When you stepped off that stagecoach, I was terrified. I thought I had made a terrible mistake, that I had no business asking a woman to share this half-built life with me. I spent that whole first day expecting you to leave." "I almost did," Olivia admitted. "I stood in that cabin and thought about how easy it would be to get back on the stagecoach." "What made you stay?" She thought about it, remembering that first day, the awkward conversation, the terrible coffee. "You offered me choice. You said you would not trap me. And I thought, anyone who gives me a choice like that might be worth staying for." Colton smiled. "Best decision I ever made, letting you decide. Because you chose me, chose us, and that means everything." "I choose you every day," Olivia said softly. "Even on the hard days, especially on the hard days. You are my partner, Colton, my true partner." They finished dinner and collected Christopher from Mrs. Henderson, driving home under a sky full of stars. The baby slept between them, and Olivia leaned against Colton's shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of the wagon, the solid warmth of her family. November brought the first snow and a surprise. David announced he was courting a girl from town, the daughter of the general store owner. He was shy about it, blushing when he told them, but Colton clapped him on the back and Olivia insisted on hearing all the details. "She is very pretty," David said, "and smart. Her father might sell me some land on credit if things work out." "That is wonderful," Olivia said sincerely. "You deserve happiness, David." The young man had become family over the months, eating at their table, playing with Christopher, sharing in their joys and struggles. The thought of him starting his own life, his own family, felt right. December arrived with bitter cold and exciting news. Colton had been elected to the Victor Town Council, a position of respect and responsibility. It would mean regular trips to town, involvement in decisions about schools and roads and development. But it also meant connections, opportunities, ways to ensure their ranch and their family's future. On Christmas morning, they sat together by the fire, Christopher now old enough to be fascinated by the lights and the sounds. Olivia had made a stuffed horse for him from scraps of fabric, and Colton had carved a set of wooden blocks. The gifts were simple, but Christopher's delight was pure. "This time last year it was just us," Colton said, watching his son shake a block with intense concentration. "Now we are three," Olivia replied, "and maybe more someday." He looked at her quickly. "Are you?" "No, not yet, but someday I would like Christopher to have brothers and sisters." "So would I," Colton said, pulling her close. "A whole house full of children, filling this place with noise and chaos and life." The new year brought challenges and growth. A hard January, but they were prepared this time, the barn reinforced, the cattle healthy. February brought warmer days and plans for spring. March saw Christopher take his first steps, wobbling across the cabin floor into his father's waiting arms. In April, David married his sweetheart in a ceremony at the Victor Church, and Colton and Olivia stood as witnesses. The young couple bought land adjacent to the Murphy ranch, planning to build their own homestead. The proximity of friends and allies made the vast territory feel less lonely, more like a community. May marked Christopher's first birthday and Olivia's discovery that she was pregnant again. This time, the news felt less frightening and more like a natural progression. They had survived one baby, they could handle two. Summer brought prosperity. The herd had grown to 30 head, and Colton sold 10 at market for excellent prices, paying off the last of their debt and putting money aside for expansion. The cabin got an addition, 2 new rooms that provided space for Christopher and the coming baby, plus a small parlor where Olivia could sew and read. August arrived, and with it, their second son, born on a cool morning with far less drama than Christopher's arrival. They named him Thomas Colton Murphy, and Christopher, now walking and babbling, was fascinated by his tiny brother. September brought reflection. 2 years since Olivia had arrived 3 weeks early, stepping off that stagecoach into dust and uncertainty. 2 children, a thriving ranch, a home built by their own hands and filled with their own love. Colton stood on the porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. Olivia came out to join him, Thomas asleep against her shoulder, and Colton wrapped his arm around both of them. "Remember when you thought you were not ready?" Olivia asked softly. "I thought I needed 3 more weeks to get the barn painted," Colton said with a laugh. "Turns out I needed you more than I needed white paint. I was so scared when I arrived," Olivia admitted. "I thought I had made a terrible mistake. The cabin was half finished, the barn was crooked, and you looked like you wanted to run away." "I did want to run away," Colton said honestly. "For about 5 minutes. Then you asked for coffee and I realized you were staying, you were real, and I had better figure out how to be worthy of that." "You were already worthy," Olivia said. "You just did not know it yet." Christopher came running out onto the porch, his small feet loud on the boards. "Papa, come see." Colton scooped up his older son, balancing him on his hip while keeping his arm around Olivia and Thomas. "See what, little man? Stars." Christopher pointed at the darkening sky where the first stars were appearing. They stood there together, the 4 of them, looking at stars above a land they were making their own. Olivia thought about all the moments that had led them here. Her father's death, Colton's letters, the early arrival that had seemed like a disaster but was really fate pushing them together before they could overthink it. "I am glad I came early," she said quietly. Colton kissed her temple, careful not to wake Thomas. "So am I. Best surprise of my life." The years that followed were full of the normal challenges and joys of ranching and family life. A 3rd child arrived, a daughter they named Charlotte, and then a 4th, another boy named William. The cabin grew with the family. additions and improvements transforming it from a rough bachelor's dwelling to a proper family home. The ranch prospered, the herd growing to over 100 head, making them one of the more successful operations in the valley. Colton's position on the town council led to involvement in bringing a school to Victor, ensuring that Christopher and his siblings would have education without traveling long distances. David and his wife had children of their own, their ranch neighboring the Murphy spread, and the two families became inseparable, sharing labor and celebrations, supporting each other through hard times. Olivia's sewing business grew into something substantial, with women coming from miles around for her services. She saved her earnings religiously, and when Christopher turned 10, she had enough to buy him his first real horse, a moment of pride that brought tears to Colton's eyes. The Wild West was changing around them, becoming more settled, more civilized. The mining boom began to fade, replaced by agriculture and legitimate business. Victor grew from a rough mining camp into a proper town with churches and schools and social organizations. Through it all, Colton and Olivia remained partners in the truest sense. They still worked side by side, still made decisions together, still turned to each other first in times of crisis or celebration. The love that had started as hope and determination had deepened into something unshakable, a bond forged in hard work and trust, and the thousand small moments that make a life. 20 years after Olivia stepped off that stagecoach, they stood on the same porch, watching their children work the land. Christopher, now 20 and married himself, managed half the herd with quiet competence. Thomas, 18 and restless, talked about going to college back east. Charlotte, 16 and fierce, could rope a calf better than most grown men. William, 14 and thoughtful, spent his spare time drawing the mountains and the cattle, capturing the beauty his parents had built. "You ever regret it?" Colton asked, his hair now shot through with silver. "Coming out here, marrying a stranger, building this life?" Olivia, her own hair graying at the temples, leaned into him with the ease of long familiarity. "Not for a single second. This life, this family, you that is everything I never knew I needed." "I was not ready for you," Colton said, echoing words from 2 decades earlier. "The barn was not finished, the cabin was a mess. I had no idea what I was doing." "Love was ready," Olivia replied, turning to face him. "Love was ready for both of us, even when we were not. We just had to be brave enough to meet it halfway." Colton kissed her, soft and sweet, a kiss that carried 20 years of shared life, 4 children, countless challenges overcome, and a love that had only grown stronger with time. When they pulled apart, they saw Christopher watching them with a smile, his own wife beside him, her belly swollen with their first grandchild. "Stop kissing on the porch," Charlotte yelled from the yard, grinning. "You are embarrassing." "Good," Colton yelled back, making Olivia laugh. That night, lying in bed in the room they had shared for 2 decades, Colton held Olivia close and said, "Thank you for coming early. Thank you for staying. Thank you for building this life with me." "Thank you for being worth staying for," Olivia whispered back. "Thank you for being ready when it mattered, even when you thought you were not." They fell asleep as they had for 20 years, wrapped around each other, secure in the knowledge that they had built something real and lasting. The ranch would continue, passed down to their children and grandchildren. The land they had fought for, worked for, loved on would remain in the family for generations. But more than the land or the cattle or the prosperity, they had built love. The cowboy had thought she was coming next month. She had arrived early and he had not been ready. But love, patient and persistent and powerful, had been ready for both of them, waiting to catch them when they finally stopped running from it and ran toward it instead. And in the end, that readiness, That willingness to leap into uncertainty with nothing but each other to hold onto had made all the difference. Their story became part of the fabric of Victor, Colorado, told and retold by their children and grandchildren, a testament to the power of taking chances, of working hard, of building love one day, one moment, one choice at a time. The ranch stood as physical proof of what two people could create when they committed to each other, and to a shared dream when they refused to let obstacles become endings, when they chose partnership over perfection and love over fear. And on warm summer nights, when the mountains turned purple in the fading light and the cattle lowed softly in the distance, you could sometimes see an elderly couple on the porch of the main house, sitting in matching rocking chairs that had been gifts to each other over the years, holding hands across the space between them, still choosing each other, still building love, still grateful for an early arrival and a readiness that had come not from preparation, but from the courage to begin anyway. That was their legacy, not just the land or the prosperity or the family, though those were substantial. Their true legacy was the example they set of what love could be when it was built on respect, partnership, and the willingness to be vulnerable with each other. They showed everyone who knew them that the best relationships are not the ones that start perfectly, but the ones where both people commit to growing together, to learning together, to facing whatever comes together. Colton Murphy, who had thought he needed 3 more weeks to be ready for a wife, learned that readiness was not about perfect circumstances but about being willing to adapt, to improvise, to meet the moment with courage. Olivia Porter Murphy, who had arrived early and uncertain, learned that home was not a place but a person, that family was not just blood but choice, and that the scariest leaps often led to the softest landings. Together, they proved that love, when given room to grow and tended with care, could thrive even in the harshest conditions. The Wild West was not an easy place for dreamers or romantics, but it was the perfect place for fighters, for believers, for people willing to work for what they wanted. And what Colton and Olivia wanted was each other, was a life built together, was a future full of possibility. They got it, all of it, and more than they had ever imagined. And it started with a stagecoach arriving 3 weeks early, with a man covered in paint, and a woman with 2 trunks and a heart full of hope, with a moment of panic that turned into a lifetime of love. That was their story, and it was perfect not because it was easy but because it was real, not because everything went according to plan but because they learned to make new plans together, not because they were ready but because they became ready together, one day at a time, one challenge at a time, one kiss on the porch at a time. And when Colton and Olivia finally passed, many years later, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, they went holding hands, their last words to each other the same as they had been so many times over the decades. I love you. I choose you. I am grateful for you. The ranch continued, the family continued, and the story continued, passed down through generations as a reminder that the best things in life often arrive early, catch us unprepared, and demand that we rise to meet them. And when we do, when we choose courage over comfort and partnership over perfection, we build something that lasts not just a lifetime but forever, echoing through the years as proof that love, real love, is always ready, even when we are not.